He's one of the biggest comedy stars of all time, but even Eddie Murphy has his what if moments. We're breaking down three blockbuster hits that he regrets turning down. Then we take a look at why a certain animated style of film might be impossible to do today and how Nollywood is finding new ways to fund its stories. We are breaking down all these stories and more right here on the Film Mandates. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this episode of the Film Mandate. So we'll delve into our very first story and just to give a rundown of all the stories we are doing today. First, we'll be talking about how Eddie Murphy himself has stated that there are three films he turned down that he wished he hadn't because it went on to become a pop culture, icon of a films, and both critically and also financially. Then we move to an animated film that became, that set a standard so high that it seems quite impossible to make today. And I'm talking about none other than Madhouse Entertainment animated film called Red Line, which is a Japanese anime. So we're talking about that particular story as well, and also why now Nollywood filmmakers are finding creative ways and means to make fun or make money or fund their stories due to the pulling out of major streamers like the Netflixes and the Amazon. So we're covering all these stories right here on this very platform. So let's delve into it right away. There are a few comedians that stand, tall among all the comedians that you can ever think of. And one of such individual is none other than Eddie Murphy himself. Is none other than Eddie Murphy himself, and he has gone on to make hits upon hits that you can name them from the Naughty Professor the to Dr. Doolittle to voicing the character Donkey in the Shrek franchise to is it Mulan voicing the dragon in Mulan. I mean, his roster of films are still as perhaps the highest skyscraper that you can ever think of. But one of the things that becomes quite surprising is that when you hear that with all this success, uh, a filmmaker or an actor of his caliber still has regrets or films that he passed or turned down. And well, he also does have regrets for films that he turned down. And we're talking about films like Ghostbusters. We're talking about films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and the last one being Rush Hour. I mean, you can't imagine how possible that it could be that if a personality of his caliber, with all the success he has, still says that he regrets turning down these particular films. And for those who perhaps might be students of what's it called film, may actually understand what he's talking about, considering the fact that these films went on to become such big phenomenal hits. So you can understand why that is the case. And so let's just take a quick look at a clip that he was being interviewed by the Associated Press, and as a result of that, he went on. I mean, he enumerated why these films actually is something that he regrets not taking them on, and has been something that he would have wished that he had approached it differently. So quickly, let's just take a brief look at why these are the case for him. So let's take a look at this short interview. I'm just hoping I will not be demonetized as a result of that. So let's do that right away.
Me staring at 23 unread messages, knowing that each
It
response will
seems
take
that
10 minutes
everything
to
has
type.
turned
We've all
around.
been there, typing.
Ghostbusters, I was supposed to do Ghostbusters and didn't do that. In Rush Hour. Didn't do that. Oh, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Those are my big three.
Pardon me, I don't know whether you're hearing me or not. Just a brief moment, just so I put together the sound. Let me just correct the sound briefly. I don't know why it's.
uh, Ghostbusters, I did Beverly Hills Cop instead. So I was like, it was do this or that. So it worked out cool. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit just sounded ridiculous to me. And the movie I did instead of Rush Hour, Rush Hour, they came to me and they were like, hey, listen, this is
Pardon me. Let me take it again. I don't know what became of my sound. Perhaps you might have heard it. I'm not so sure from my end. So yeah. So I'll take it again briefly. Okay, let's go.
Ghostbusters. I was supposed to do Ghostbusters and didn't do that. In Rush Hour. Didn't do that. Oh, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Those are my big three. With Ghostbusters, I did Beverly Hills Cop instead. So I was like, it was do this or that. So it worked out cool. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit just sounded ridiculous to me. And the movie I did instead of Rush Hour, Rush Hour, they came to me and they were like, hey, listen, this is action comedy. You're gonna be in LA and you're running around with Jackie Chan and physical karate and all. And they said, we got this other script where you go to Florida and you just have to wear one wardrobe, no change, and you shave your hair, and it's easy, sit on the beach so I was like, let's go sit on the beach. And I did that and the movie was horrible. And Rush Hour was this huge smash.
Yeah. So this is just a short clip that Eddie Murphy granted, which was used in Being Eddie. That is his Netflix documentary about his life story. I mean, chronicling both his life and career, and that is really interesting to see. And Eddie Murphy, as we have come to know, has starred in such certain iconic films, one of which you're seeing on the screen, that's the Beverly Hills Cop. And the three films he did mention actually have gone on to become one of some of the biggest hits, that you can ever think of. And they are more like cultural icons, or they've been sort of cemented in the pop culture lexicon that the studios always, keep making sequels of them. You talk about what's it called? Talk about Ghostbusters. They've gone on to make several of those films. And then you talk about Rush Hour, which has, they made three parts already, but yeah, the fourth part has been in pre development for or pre production for quite a long time. And last but not the least, which ones did I mention? I mentioned so Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Even though Who Framed Roger Rabbit has not been remade, it's still one of the films that defined a new technique of filmmaking, combining traditional animation or 2D animation with live action. So that became the very first one that did that. So obviously, those films are phenomenal films that have redefined and impacted the film industry, broadly. So I can understand why, looking back or casting his mind back on all that, he would have wished that things had played out differently. However, I mean, he did also state that for one, I mean, obviously, even though he was not able to do, I think, was it Ghostbusters, he went on to do Beverly Hills Cop, which became a phenomenal hit. And even till I think recently, just a couple of years ago, another installation in the franchise was also actually done. So yes, he had successes on certain parts, but for others, it didn't really pan out well. And he would have wished that things had worked out well. But for every one of those films, they made quite some huge amounts of money during the year of their releases. And not just that, but also in terms of what's it called? In terms of critically, it was critically acclaimed. Let's just take a brief look as to how well these films performed. So we framed Roger Rabbit, which was released in 1988, was made of a budget of a production budget of $50.6 million, but it went on to make $351.5 million worldwide. That is how successful it became at the time, which is a huge hit. And also with the Ghostbusters franchise, just even taking the one that was released in 1984, that is the original one, it went on to make $296 million worldwide. And after that first one, there's been four more that have been done uh, with varying critical reception as well as varying box office receipts. But in all, it's been very successful, even to the very last one that was released last year that made $202 million. So it's been good as a franchise. So all in all, these two franchises have been very successful. Now moving on to the very last one, that is Rush Hour, which actually saw Chris Tucker take his place or the role that he could have played together with Jackie Chan. The first one was released in 1998 and made $244.7 million, and with on as against the modest budget. So that has been successful. And when you take a look at the 2001, that is the part two that was released together with the 2003, which was released in so with Rush Hour 3 released in 2007, all went on to make. I mean, the third one made $258.1 million, but the second one actually was the biggest of it all, which made $347.4 million. So, in hindsight, an actor who, I mean, even though he's as successful as he is now, you can understand why he would have wished that things had, if he had thought of it well, he would have done differently. And these are things that sometimes you can't do, I mean, much about. You win some, you lose some. I mean, that is the game of life. And I can understand because, I mean, for Rush Hour in particular, I can understand because he had at the time he had made what's it called, Beverly Hills Cop, and maybe think that is too similar in terms of pattern or genre, because this is the buddy cop kind of a film and it's quite similar to this, even though with the Beverly Hills Cop he stood out as the lead, unlike Rush Hour where it's more like a dual lead compared to what he's done with the Beverly Hills Cop. So it is quite understandable that he may want to pass this on. However, I think just as you saw in the interview that you watched, he did say that Who Framed Roger Rabbit sounded quite, the title sounded quite not right with him. So in that case, well, that is his loss, But sometimes when you have successfully made a couple of movies with a particular, title or with a particular frame, you would understand, you would want to continue in that sure bet kind of titled movies or any other formulas that made it work well. But obviously, sometimes you can't predict how successful some certain genres will be, and you want to, I mean, avoid taking unnecessary risks that may potentially, affect your career. So I can understand him. But even with all his success, it is indeed good to sometimes reflect back and accept the fact that things may not have gone well the way you anticipated. But I think all in all, we can undoubtedly say for a fact that the career of Eddie Murphy has been one of a ride, a very exciting ride. And even though he's come back with a couple of films, they have been modestly successful, seeing that a lot of them, on much of his recent films, have been straight to streaming. So we might not have seen or known how successful would have been in the cinemas, but one way or the other, we had a lot of people watching it, and therefore it is understandable. But he has a couple more films to come, so obviously we'll be looking forward to see how successful those ones actually become as well. So all in all, let me know which of these three films do you think would have been the most different with Eddie Murphy actually accepting to act in them. Would it have made a good impact, or would it have been quite terrible had he taken them on? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly let me know it in the comment section below. So moving on from Eddie Murphy's what if moments, we now move on to another exciting story that I know perhaps most people may not have thought of or may not even know about, and that is Madhouse Entertainment film Red Line. And Red Line actually happens to be an animated movie that broke grounds in terms of 2D animation to a level and a standard that perhaps have never been replicated and will never ever be replicated before. I mean, ever. And this has to do with the 2D animated style that they went for, and not just ordinarily a 2D, but they went in to do a 2D animated film that is full blown animation. And when we talk about full animation, we're talking about how smooth and how fluid of a movement the characters in the animations are. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched this animation yet, but in researching to do this presentation, I went on to look at the trailer for the animation, and I can tell you of a fact, it feels as if it was generated with AI. I mean, I wouldn't say generated with AI, but generated with CGI, and it is that good. Every movement, every car racing is so fluid and so realistic that it feels as if it was shot, live action, and rather rendered into a 2D animation film, and that is animated film, and that is quite exciting. And as a result of that, I'm making it my mission to watch it and potentially see if I can come back and do a review of it, because it is exciting to watch. And I can understand that, because I was doing a research let's first, before I tell you about the research, a little research I did, let's take a quick look as to an article published in the Fandom Wire that details how groundbreaking this film was in terms of its making, and why potentially it may never ever be replicated. So this article says that director of Madhouse movie with a whopping 100,000 animation frames reveals another movie like that is no longer possible. Studio Madhouse Red Line, Studio Madhouse Red Line anime movie is one of the cult films within the anime industry, but sadly, something like that can never be recreated. So let's go to the reason why he says it's possibly, very impossible to follow. And it says that, why is Red Line's animation so hard to follow? So there is a movie poster of the film. So as mentioned above, Red Line used more than 100,000 hand-drawn frames for the animation, and it took 7 years to bring it to life. The animation style was incredibly smooth, and every frame was full of detail. While Koike is actually the director of this particular animation. He says that while Koke would love to work on something just like the Red Line movie once again, he doesn't believe he can, as the intensity required to create something like that would be overwhelming and physically tiring. He stated, I would love to do something like that again, but I don't think I could now. Doing all that drawing and animating with that intensity was hard. I was young then, the whole team was young. It was a miracle that we were able to pull off. What makes Red Lines animation so unique is that you can clearly see the intricate designs of the characters and their vehicles, and the way everything moves during the races feels dynamic and exciting. Not only that, considering the current environment of the anime industry, it doesn't feel like any studio or animator would contribute 7 years or 100,000 hand drawn frames to a single project. And that indeed is the reason why he thinks it is literally not going to be possible to do that now, because the toll it will take on you to get that done is on an unprecedented level that you can never imagine. Perhaps in today's day and age, with the advent of CGI and now AI, maybe that would could be possible. But the key to traditional animation or 2D animation is the fact that the artists or the animators involved have to draw everything from scratch by themselves, and that is what make it 2D or traditional animation. And as a result of that, to make that possible with CGI, that would defeat the purpose. Just as we have what's it called, the Studio Ghibli. I'm blanking out on the name, but Studio Ghibli found that sees using AI as a travesty against the craft itself. And I believe that seeing Koike's commitment to making this possible, I don't think they would want to do a film augmented with AI. They wouldn't do it at all. And it is difficult to express what I mean until you watch the red line animation film itself, or even just watch the trailer. And the little I can tell you is the fact, not to, with no pun intended, but it puts Fast and Furious films to shame. I mean, this hand-drawn animation is spectacular, and it is as if when you watch the trailer, or when I watched the trailer, it felt as if that they were playing with some lens tricks to make the perspective of the cars in the film feel exaggerated, to the way the certain portions of the film, the physics dynamics in terms of the physics in the film, the wind, the force of the you know the elements within the world having impact on the cars and the people driving the cars. It feels as if it is more or less something made out of or out of a CGI graphics film. But every single effect that was exerted on, I mean, on the characters in the film and how the characters were reacting, the details, every single thing was drawn. Even to this very image that you can see there, every single element was drawn. And to talk about 100,000 frames, listen, when we talk about 100,000 frames, maybe we would assume that it's just a simple frame as it is, but it goes beyond that. We are talking about every frame, you know, so every single frame contributing to the cinematic completion of the film. And not just that, but every frame would be worked on several times to get the colors right, to get the effects right, and making sure that every effect works in perfect synchronicity to make sure that it doesn't jerk. It feels natural to the entire movement process. And for those who may not know much about animation is literally every, maybe I'm going too nerdy here, but let me just go into a little bit, get into the rabbit hole a little bit. But for every movement of a film we watch, every film is actually made up of still images. I know it may be difficult to understand, but for those who do editing, they would understand it better. So every movement or every motion picture that we watch actually consists of several frames. And these frames, when played at a certain rate, let's say 24 frames per second, gives us the illusion of movement. And that makes the things move. And that is what they do. So every single movement we watch in animation is actually drawn or has to be created to give it an illusion of movement. And that is what they were explaining here, that 100,000 frames were drawn together to make this film possible. And the little research I did is that I realized that regardless, this happens to be the animated movies with the highest frame. Maybe it's not reported yet on the internet, so maybe I may not know. Maybe there could be a film with the highest frames possible. But so far, one of the films that I discovered had quite some higher amount of drawings made was let me cross check. Yeah, was a Disney's film. Why am I blanking out now? Pardon me, I'm just missing out on that. But one of Disney's films also had the highest amount of frames drawn. Uh, I don't know, but all of a sudden I missed that particular story. But yeah, so Disney had one of their films having the highest amount of frames drawn. So it is quite interesting, but it is quite difficult to pinpoint. You have the Thief and the Cobbler, which is one of the recently released episode of One Piece, which I mean, but it is not really as much as I can imagine. But I think either Beauty and the Beast or one of them had one of the highest rated in terms of the amount of frames made. And but still none of them can compel or compare itself to what they were able to do with this 100,000 frames. And they spent a total of 7 years to get it done. And this 7 years has to do with the exact production process, not perhaps counting the pre-production process. So it was quite a Herculean task to get that done. And that is quite amazing, an amazing feat they have achieved for this film. And I can understand in this day and age, no studio may be willing to wait to get, uh, wait for a filmmaker to spend 7 years to get these drawings done to make a film. And that is simply impossible. In this day and age, it looks like if you can't speed up to get your work done on time, the studio may even cut their funding for the films and pull the plug. And it is quite a difficult time for artists who like to really, go as traditional as possible. And it's unfortunate that these are the times we find ourselves in. So regardless, it looks like there's nothing we can do about it, but there are still some diehards who are decided to go as traditional as possible and just, do the best they can. And Studio Ghibli happens to be one of them. And I'm sure Madhouse is also in that particular group who have decided that regardless, they will stick to drawing things as traditional as possible. So yeah, this is quite an amazing feat, and it is perhaps a story or a video or a film that I think everybody should do their best to watch. So let me know what you think. What do you think is the biggest factor making such labor-intensive animation impossible today? Is it cost? Is it time? Or a lack of audience? And a lack of audience is key in this question because at the time this thing was released, unfortunately, not so many people saw it. Not so many people saw it. The other people saw the other commercial films, but this film was one way or the other buried in the host of roster of other films that were made in terms of animation that were made that year. But this film, in terms of how expertly done, it tops them all. So, what do you think? Time, cost, or audience? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. So now we move on to our last story of the day. And this story is dear to my heart because it is from Africa and our neighboring country in Nigeria, that is the Nollywood industry. And one of the things you cannot take away from Nollywood is how far they have come and how impactful they have been as a film industry, bringing much needed attention to what we are doing here in Africa. And over a couple of years, perhaps within the period of a decade, the last decade, the buoyant film industry drew the attention of some prestigious streaming services to come into the country and invest as much as they can. And we had the Netflixes and the Amazons troop in to invest as much as they can in the Nollywood film industry, extending such investment to the film industry of Kenya, South Africa, and a couple of others. But with time, the expected returns that they were hoping for, together with other factors or reasons, these giants, streaming giants, had to pull out, with one or two, productions being done, from time to time. However, with the pulling out of these industries and the desire to tell authentic African stories, the Nollywood filmmakers decided to find alternative means to make that possible. So they resorted to putting their films on, the platforms like YouTube, even though not the typical streaming service you would think of, but it started working out. But the payment, is, or the revenue generation is not as much as you would have it compared to the prestigious streaming services like Amazon and Netflix. However, in recent times, it looks like Nollywood has found a very ingenious way to generate funding to make their the business possible. And this we find in an article published in the TechPoint website. And this is what he has to say. As streamers pull back, Nollywood turns to brands to keep the cameras rolling. YouTube offers reach but not revenue. So Nigerian filmmakers are selling screen time, and they're talking about nothing else than branding or product placement. So let's go on to read further. When Love in Every Word 2, the latest film from Nollywood actress and filmmaker Omoni Oboli, rolled its end credits, something stood out beyond the cast and crew. A string of brands, including UBA, MTN, Coca Cola, GIG, Logistics, Vaseline, and Close Up, appeared as collaborators and sponsors. Their presence could mark the start of a shift in Nollywood, in how Nollywood sustains itself financially. Over the past year, we've documented the rise of YouTube as an alternative to traditional streaming platforms in Nigeria. This shift comes as Netflix and Amazon Prime have reduced their local participation, forcing filmmakers to explore new sources of distribution. For these filmmakers, while YouTube provides a less lucrative avenue to earn from their art, it also holds a willing audience with low barriers to entry. Even before YouTube became a proper distribution channel, filmmakers such as Funke Akindele and Toyin Abraham had already found success in cinemas as they sought alternative revenue streams. However, that typically comes with major challenges. Movies must be of a high quality for viewers to justify going to the cinemas. Filmmakers must also spend significantly on marketing to ensure a steady stream of viewers, while also contending with gatekeepers who could limit a movie's reach. Compare that with the opportunity presented by YouTube. Once a filmmaker has a movie, they could be up and running in a few hours. So there's a lot that this article says about this new ingenious ways of generating revenue, and I can perfectly understand why filmmakers want to do that. And the demand for storytelling in this era has reached an unprecedented high than any other era or time in history. With the advent of several social media platforms and with the ability to access it wherever you can with your own device, the mobile phone or the mobile devices, content demand has gotten to a place where there is an audience for any kind of content you can ever create. And for the film industry wanting to also catch up to this particular trend, it is of no surprise that a lot of filmmakers will resort to putting their films on YouTube if the bottlenecks that would prevent them from having their films reaching out would be a problem. They would find ways and means of getting that done. And social media has made it possible for filmmakers to diversify where they could put their films, whether on the premium platforms like in the cinemas or on the streaming services, but also on YouTube's or other social media platforms as well. So obviously you can understand why that would be the case. However, in terms of creating this content, productions are capital intensive, seeing the fact that it is a team effort. And with team effort means that you have to bring in more hands and more talent to make that possible. And as a result of that, this actually increases the cost of production. And fortunately, for putting content on certain platforms like YouTube or social media, the barrier to entry is a little bit low, with audience not so bothered about the quality of production being made. And therefore, as a result of that, a lot of content would have to be made, perhaps 3 films a month on those social media platforms to be able to satisfy the demand made by the audience. And as the audience watches it more and more, it gives the filmmakers the opportunity to make money. However, there is a discrepancy in terms of revenue generation, where in Africa, filmmakers make less, far less, perhaps maybe somewhere 1% or even 10%, um, compared to 100% that filmmakers or content creators in Europe and the Americas will make. And so, as a result of that, to be able to keep on generating enough revenue to to keep your productions afloat, filmmakers have sorted to partnering with businesses who are desirous of advertising their products on in these films. And this has resulted into a number of content creators allowing product placement to be in their films to shore up the funding they need to keep on making these films. So it is understandable. But one of the key things that, or two key things that this article did mention, which I think is crucial, is the fact that because of the limited number of advertisers, it's going to create a possible scenario where these advertisers are all over in almost every production that exists on the continent, or in Nollywood to be specific. And this also is a problem because the amounts they would pay is literally may not be necessarily equal to the potential of the reach of these films, meaning that they will be paying far less, ridiculously less of a value than they should for these particular productions. But if you are in a fix where you don't have much of a choice, obviously you're going to accept it as it is without bothering so much. However, the article also did state that it is a good initiative that has begun now, hoping with the hope that maybe in times to come, more businesses may join in this particular venture, potentially with an international business also joining the fray, which may help boost the financial revenues of these filmmakers. So that is actually good to know. And so we would hope that there's going to be a time where the value of brand advertisement in these particular productions would go up and go a long way to help these filmmakers to make good enough money to make that possible, whether be it putting it in the cinemas or putting it on these platforms. So it is indeed an ingenious way, I may say, or I should say, that Nollywood filmmakers are finding ways around to make that possible. And I think this is also happening in other parts of Africa as well. But in terms of the high volumes of it, it is happening in Nollywood as we speak. So let me know what you think. Is relying on brand funding a sustainable future for film industries, or does it risk too much creative compromise? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in this comment section below. And generally, in all these three stories that we've spoken about, which of these stories do you think tells us the most about the future of the film industry? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And so all too soon we finish with these stories for the day, but having returned from the weekend, obviously you know I'll be bringing you the top 10 best performing films that were in the cinemas over the weekend. So if you went to watch any film in the cinemas over the weekend, it is now time to find out which ones performed well at the box office. So starting with the North American box office, we take a look at the top 10 films, only the top 10. There are still more, but only the top 10 films that performed well at the cinemas. So starting with number one, Wicked for Good released just this past weekend, and it made a total of $150 million at the North American box office. The North American box office meaning North America and America and Canada, USA and Canada. We go on to take a look at the number two, dropping from number one. We have Now You See Me, Now You Don't, made 9,120,000 this weekend, and a total of $36,829,120. And number three, still remaining there, is Predator Badlands, making $6,250,000, and a total domestic of $76,284,737. And number four, dropping for number two, is The Running Man, making $5.8 million, and a total domestic of $27,048,103. And number five, releasing for the first time, is the Brendan Fraser's film Rental Family, making $3.3 million. And number six, Sisu Road to Revenge, releasing for the first time, also made $2.6 million. Regretting You, dropping from number four to number seven, made $1,520,000, and a total domestic of $47,258,477. And number nine, dropping from number five, is Black Phone 2, which has made $1 million this weekend, and a total domestic of $76,388,985. And number 10, dropping from number eight, is Sarah's Oil, making $771,542, and a total domestic of $10,352,218. So this sums up the top 10 domestic box office in the North American market. So now let's take a quick look at the top 10 films internationally. And then at the top 10 films internationally, it looks like nothing much has changed from last week. It's still bearing the same films that I did go through last week. So there's no need to go through again. Starting with the first one being Nezatu with 1.9 billion, and the last one being the fantastic First Steps at $521 million. So I'll leave the link to the list in the comment section below for you to take a look at it if you so choose. So all too soon, we have come to an end of this particular episode of the Film Mandate. And thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave in the comment section below. And also do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can join and help the platform and help this channel as we talk about movies all the time. So thanks again. And my name is Papa O2, and this has been the Film Mandate. I'll see you tomorrow with another exciting episode. See you soon.